good morning, and welcome to the International Mastermind Show. This is Galen Bingham, the leadership strategist. We are just so excited about this show because we're going to be talking about Think and Grow Rich. We're going to be talking about this incredible book, and it is just us. We're just so used to having guests that we're not used to having a master class where it's just going to be the co-host. But that's what we're going to do today, and we're going to get into this conversation. You still have time to join us in the studio, so definitely join by clicking the link, and you could ask us questions as we get into this conversation about imagination. And yeah, let's get into it. Ms. Ann McNeil, the Master Wealth Builder. How are you doing today?
If I were any better, I say all the time, I would be you. And today is no different, as you can tell. So we want to welcome everybody here today. As you can see, we are actually having a very good time as we produce this podcast. And so welcome to the International Mastermind Association's Think and Grow Rich Mastermind Live Masterclass. And what you are experiencing is the imagination at work. And however you start is how you will end. Napoleon Hill tells us in his awesome book, Think and Grow Rich, that the imagination is really the workshop of the brain. And when you think about a workshop, what are you doing in there? You know, the imagination, it is also said, is like scissors to the mind. I like something that was shared in the book called The Game of Life, that talks about the fact that our imagination really, and I actually wrote it down, is from the book of Proverbs. When you think about the word Proverbs in 4:23, talks about how, our issues from the heart is really the imagination of the mind. And so as we began to talk and share with you our thoughts about this philosophy, I just want to encourage all of you, if you have a copy of the book, walk through this journey with us. This workshop of your mind is basically from your plans, your thoughts, your hunches, your urgings, your inspirations, the impulse, the desire. All of these things are giving shape to your imagination. But how do you actually exercise your imagination? What do you do on a daily basis? Well, that's what we're going to begin to discuss here with you today. The actual demonstration of your imagination comes from what you allow into your ears, your eyes, your mind, your emotions. And actually, I like to say that my mind and all of our minds actually, does not know the difference between what's true and false. It only knows what we tell it over and over and over again. And this is why and how the autosuggestion principle begins to impact our imagination based upon what we are hearing, right? Keeping in mind all the time that there's actually two forms of imagination. The author tells us that one is synthetic and one is creative. And when you think about, I like to use the example of Cirque du Soleil, right? You have the imagination of a circus and ballet. Bringing those two together, you have synthetic imagination. That's just one example. So think, as we walk through this, think about what other synthetic imaginative things you experience. But now creative imagination is oftentimes when we're tapping into that infinite intelligence, if you will, that spirit, that urge that is directing us. Sometimes we go in that direction and sometimes we don't. But I would be remiss if I did not come back to our co-host. And as we began to talk about this conversation, we also, as we come here every single Saturday and share with you, we're creating what we are experiencing as synthetic imagination, bringing a lot of individuals together, bringing a lot of thoughts together, and we've created this podcast. This is another example of a product of synthetic imagination using our creativity. Now, Galen Bingham, Dr. James, what are your thoughts about this principle, and how do you use your synthetic imagination and or your creative imagination?
Yeah, I'll jump in. First of all, I'm just excited about this topic because it really taps into a lot of what I work with my clients on. And I'm really focused on this phrase where it says man's only limitation within reason lies in his development and use of imagination. And we on the show, we talk a lot about how the general education is not enough to be successful. You have to have specialized knowledge, and that can often be misconstrued into suggesting that you don't need to go to school. Well, this chapter talks about how synthetic imagination is about bringing two ideas together or taking another idea and giving it a different function. If you don't have a general education, you don't have things to bring together. You don't know about the things that could bring together. You don't know about past ideas and how you could give it a different function. So general education is important. General knowledge is important for the purpose of using synthetic imagination. And the limitation there is if you don't have general knowledge, you can't use synthetic imagination. And then the limitation, from my perspective, the limitation of creative imagination is the willingness and the ability to act on these thoughts that you get from the universe. If you're unwilling to act, if you need to have proof that something is going to work before you get started, then you're not going to be able to take advantage of creative imagination when you receive it. And it's been said in our circles that ideas are just looking for places to be born. And if I get an idea and I don't act on it, it's going to move to Peter. It's gonna say, "Hey, Peter, will you give me an opportunity to be born?" So the ability, the willingness, the daringness, the courage to act on creative imagination when no one else has ever done it before, that's the jewel, that's the juice to make this powerful.
Wow, Dr. James, your thoughts.
You all are just getting hot and heavy. And I thought this was just the intro. Wait a minute now. So, good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Peter A. James. So excited to be here with you all. Everyone just went deep this morning on this imagination chapter. If you're just joining us, we analyze Think and Grow Rich, the text by Napoleon Hill, every single week. We dive on in, but we dive on in from a perspective of how does it affect our lives? How does it affect our careers? How does it affect our businesses? How are we allowing it to impact those areas of our lives? And today we're going into the fifth chapter, the fifth principle, which is called imagination. One of my favorite lines in this chapter is the one by Napoleon Hill. He says, "The only limitation is that which one sets up in one's own mind." So as a college professor, as an entrepreneurship professor, I am actually always diving on into the creativity, the imagination of students. You know, I often hear, "I have no idea. I don't know what I can come up with to create." The truth is, we sometimes put a block on ourselves because we think that all ideas are so fresh and brand new. And here's where I'm going with this. All ideas, as kind of Galen had mentioned already, all ideas are spurned from other ideas, right? It's somewhat of an improvisation. Is another thing that is called, everything is like a remix. So again, work with me now. You think of a jazz player who plays the trumpet or the trombone. Yes, he or she practices for hours, the piano even practices for hours, days, months, years, practice, practice, practice. And after practicing so long, they are able to create their own tunes, their own medleys, their own music. because they've been doing this for so long based off of all the other chords and all the other music that they played. They're now able to be creative, right? Because of, going back to what Galen mentioned, because of their history, because of their education, their learning, their practice, right? It often says with a lot of music, you hear a lot about how everything is remixed these days. We're sampling from other music. We're bringing it into our chords and our current song. Nothing is quite fresh, but everything is used from everything in the past. We often think that Steve Jobs and Apple created the iPhone and the touchscreen. So wrong. It was created way before that. Steve Jobs just improved it dramatically. So now, as we're sitting here with this imagination chapter, and many of us think that this is a block, I can't create, I can't imagine anything. Your imagination probably lies right around you, with people who are right around you too. We are just, as Napoleon Hill just said, we're creating this limitation in our heads that prevents us from going to that next level. Good stuff.
All right. Oh.
Go for it, Galen.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
But
I just got to jump in there, Peter, because just now you just reminded me when you start talking about jazz. Of course, I'm going to wake up here. But when you just reminded me of a phrase from my favorite jazz musician, Miles Davis, who is probably one of the most creative jazz players in history. One of, not the, but one of. And he said, in order to be a great jazz musician, you have to learn everything you can and then forget everything you've learned and just show up. Right. And so that's what we're talking about. Learn everything that you can so that you can understand what's the structure of how to play. And that's where synthetic imagination comes from. And then he says, forget everything that you learn and just show up and be used by the Spirit. John Coltrane, another great jazz musician, towards the end of his life and career, he said that he was playing for God and you just happened to be in the room, right? And so he was connected with this creative imagination because of all of his learning, because of all of his study, and because of all of his practice.
Well, before we go too much further, I'd like for us to take a pause and talk about how all of these principles connect to each other, starting with desire. And then we're going to come back and give some other resources. And Galen, you just teed us up with those two phenomenal connectors, creative beings, if you will, because they are an excellent example of how you can use your own creative imagination, whether it's through an instrument, through song, through your voice, through your words, but being willing to be open to the Spirit as it leads and guides you with everybody else just in the room, right? So if you would go on and share, Galen, the 13 principles, and our producer in residence will tee it up so we can then come back and go a little bit deeper in this principle. And for those of you that are listening, please remember to comment, like, share, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. Comment, like, and share. But while we're playing this video, contact a friend or maybe a family member. Go on to YouTube, go on to Facebook, share this and invite your family and friends to be a part of this conversation with you because they are impacting your imagination, whether you realize it or not. All right, Galen.
Yeah, it is so easy to think of these as individual principles, individual chapters, because we talk about them in an individual way. But the real beauty of this philosophy is how these principles connect and sit on top of each other. So as you watch or listen to this video, think about how all of this is connected. And all of this really does start with, what do you really, really, really want? And that's your desire. So let's go ahead and take a listen and watch this video.
Number one is desire. Napoleon Hill said that everything starts with a burning desire, a compelling reason for doing what it is we do. Step two is faith, having belief in our ability to attain that which we desire. Step 3 is what we call autosuggestion. Autosuggestion simply means being very intentional about the things that we are pouring into our thoughts, into our brains, and into our consciousness. Our brains, our minds will receive everything automatically, but we have to work extra hard to make sure that the positive things are what we are feeding ourselves, because those positive thoughts are going to turn into positive actions. Step number 4 is specialized knowledge. No one person knows everything, even about whatever their particular area of expertise might be. And the value of the mastermind principle is using the specialized knowledge of other people. Step number 5 is imagination, the workshop of the mind. Everything starts with our imagination and our thoughts, the burning desire to transform those thoughts into our reality. In order to do that, we have to take a look at step 6, which is organized planning. That is how we crystallize our desire into action, organizing ourselves. Having the thought and not acting on the thought isn't going to get us anywhere. We have the thought, we go through the organized planning to transform that thought into action. Step number 7 is decision. What Napoleon Hill said is the mastery of procrastination. Napoleon Hill said that the antidote to procrastination is simply to make a decision and then move on that decision. Step 8 is persistence. We have to have a sustained effort which is induced by our faith in order to achieve our goals. One of Napoleon Hill's books I love, even the title, 3 Feet from Gold. Those people who became rich during the gold rush in the wild, wild west days didn't do that because they were necessarily smarter or had better information than anyone else. It's because they stayed just a little bit longer. Sometimes people left when they were just literally 3 feet from gold. So hanging in there, being persistent, is step number 8. Step number 9, the power of the mastermind, the driving force. None of us can accomplish anything on our own. Everybody, I don't care who you are, from the most prominent person to the person who might be considered the lowest on the totem pole, everybody has someone who helped them get to where they are. And the power of the mastermind is being able to use those influences around us, use the thoughts, use the knowledge, use the exploration of other people to help us in achieving our goal. Step number 10, the mystery of sex transmutation. This title can be a little confusing, but essentially what the mystery of sex transmutation means is that we oftentimes in our society think of sex as being purely physical. It is absolutely physical, but what Napoleon Hill teaches us is that sex also has an emotional element, and that sex is the strongest of our desires. That if we can take our sexual energy, transform that into positive, creative influences, it can propel us to new heights. And so we spend quite a bit of time talking about the mystery of step 10, which is sex transmutation. Step number 11 is the subconscious mind, which Napoleon Hill tells us is the connecting leap between our human mind and the infinite intelligence, the source of all thought, the source of all creativity. Conscious mind, we spent some time talking about how we use that through the influence of autosuggestion and what we're feeding into our mind. Step number 12, which is the brain, the broadcasting and receiving station of thought. Final step number 13, the sixth sense, the door to the temple of wisdom. This is the final step through which infinite intelligence may and will communicate voluntarily without any effort from or demands by the individual. The principle is the apex of the philosophy. It can be assimilated, understood, and applied only by first mastering the other 12 principles.
And there you have it, all of the principles. Ms. Ann, how do you leverage and coordinate all of these principles? And specifically, how do you leverage your imagination to do all the amazing things that you're doing all over the world?
Wow, thank you. Thank you, Galen, for the question. I would like to just yield to something that I read to answer the question about life being a game. And it wasn't really until I began to connect the dots, in all of the reading, and understanding that if we're not connected spiritually, if you will, to the infinite and understanding that all creativity comes from the other book and the understanding of how that works. And so for me, just being able to continuously being a student, not just of this book called Think and Grow Rich, but reading something in every area of my life. And even this morning, Galen, I'm reminded that I have not begun to scratch the surface of using my creativity and understanding how does it look for me? And I like to challenge all of us to think about this. Creatively, when you think about your imagination, what does it really look like for you? And this is what I'm learning. My creativity comes from my imagination. My imagination comes from my ideas. My ideas and creativity and imagination comes from my feelings and my hunches and my urgings and my inspirations. And where does that come from? Now we began to tap into the conscious and the subconscious mind. And when you think about, and we've talked about this, I believe it was in auto-suggestion principle, right? Also, I'll go back to the Bible. I think it's Proverbs 4:23 that talks about the fact that we should keep our heart, which is our imagination, with all diligence, because out of it comes the issues of life. So what are we putting into our heart? It comes from what we allow into our eyes, our ears, our thoughts, our feelings of those around us, right? And that impacts, if you will, how we see things. And so for me, Galen, every single day, I ask and you've heard this over and over, but the more I get into this principle, the more I'm reminded how and why I ask my mind, which is my imagination, right, to give me at least 10 ideas every day. I don't act on them, no, but just for the mere fact that I am exercising my imagination, creativity muscle. And whatever we exercise will grow, right? And whatever those ideas are that I write down, it is amazing how they continue to connect over and over. You know, I can talk. So, so you're asking me about something that is so personal to me. And I'm talking about, just imagine. Hold that thought. Now, what did I just do? I asked each of us listening to do what? To imagine. Just imagine. Images. When we listen to storytellers, we are imagining a picture in our mind of whatever they're saying. And every single one of us are imagining something different. So as we become storytellers of our own stories, right? I like something else that I heard about, that this, this imagination becomes the scissors of the mind, and is always cutting. And it's cutting out pictures. It's cutting out pictures that we hold. And this is why when we think about a vision board and visioning and envisioning, what is it that you want in every single area of your life? And that is what we actually end up getting, whether it's negative or positive. So I can go on and on and on. Yes, and on about this idea of how I tap into my own imagination. Before I let the microphone go, I will say this. The more I learn about imagination and the conscious and the subconscious mind, and how my imagination is impacted by what I allow into my mind, Galen, I would tell you, all of us don't really understand what we think we understand about what we do and why we do what we do, and how we're actually influenced by what we see and what we hear. Let me just let me just turn this back over because I don't want to go into the other principles of the subconscious mind and autosuggestion and all those things. But I think that this is one of the most powerful principles in this entire book, because until we really begin to understand, man, life and death we hear is in the power of the tongue. What are we saying to ourselves that's impacting this imagination? So I'll come back to you with the question for you, and also Peter, how do you demonstrate your own, imagination, and how do you use that? This is powerful, powerful, powerful.
And Peter, this conversation is reminding me of, you and I both studied with Daniel Goleman and studied the principles of emotional intelligence and the power of limiting beliefs. And I was just intrigued because you and I kind of focused on the same principles in our setup for this conversation. How do you break past limiting beliefs? Because we all have them. We all have limiting beliefs, but how do you break past your limiting beliefs to access synthetic and creative imagination? Because it's one thing to say, wow, this is a great idea, but if you don't act on it, then you're just as profitable as the person who didn't have the belief if you don't act on them. So how do you manage past your limiting beliefs to take full advantage of imagination?
Autosuggestion. I'll start and stop there, but then let me expound on it. So I think, what I've been able to do is combine, and I try to communicate this with clients a lot of times, but it's hard. It's hard when you are not deep into Think and Grow Rich or deep into emotional intelligence. And here's the fact, and everybody who's listening needs to hear this, because no matter where you are on life scale, extremely wealthy, not wealthy at all, everything in between, not successful, very successful, there is that self-doubt. There exists second guessing. There exists imposter syndrome for everybody to a certain level. The ones who are most successful have been able to strategically overcome this self-limiting belief on a regular basis. Those who have not are kind of stuck in the telling themselves stories, telling themselves they can't do that. I'll never be able to. There's that block. The reason that this is so magical for us, though, Galen, is because we are in the midst of this Think and Grow Rich. And let me just, in this chapter right here, it says, God seems to throw himself on the side of people who know exactly what they want. And if they are determined to get just that, right? So now, again, those of you who are watching, what's your purpose? What's your goal? What's your objective? Are you all in? Is the will and the desire at a 10? How do you eliminate the self-limiting beliefs, the self-doubt, the imposter syndrome, to ensure that those don't get in the way of you getting to your goal, your objective, your next level? And what's going to happen is that you all are going to have to identify. I mentioned autosuggestion at the very beginning there, right? I mentioned autosuggestion for a reason, because now I've been able to strategically reaffirm to myself what I am going to accomplish, what I am doing, what are my goals and objectives, and I'm going to get there. And here's the thing, just as the book also says that you begin, and you all have heard this, if you tell yourself or you tell someone else a lie long enough, they begin to believe that lie. If you expose yourselves around thieves and robbing or that negative type of activity on a regular basis, you begin to become that. How about we flip that, right? And now, how about engrossing yourself with Ann McNeil and Galen Bingham on a regular basis? How about engrossing yourself with your goal and your objective? And those affirmations that you begin to tell yourself that I am going to succeed. I will accomplish this. You begin to eliminate that doubt over time. Doesn't happen overnight, but the repetition, the engrossing, the conversations of the people in that mastermind that are continuously asking you those questions that help you get to that next level, that help you overcome. That's how you do it. So to answer Galen's question, how do you remove that self-doubt? How do you get through that self-limiting behavior? It starts with auto-suggestion and you having to remind yourself over and over again who you are, right? And I don't know if we do that enough as individuals. I know we don't do that enough as society. And oftentimes we see it, the negative side of that, play out more than not. Ann McNeil, your thoughts?
Yes, actually, as you were talking, I started thinking about ideas that have become reality for me, but also just hanging around people that that impact us whether we know it or not. And when you mentioned this section of the book that the author talks about, when you are associated with crime, in the beginning, you abhor it. But as we are around it long enough, we eventually began to embrace it. And I began to realize in my own journey that if I needed to or wanted to do better, if you will, and become more knowledgeable in the space of construction, I needed to go where they go, do what they do, participate in the activities that they participate in. And slowly, from reading this book over and over and over again and meeting with our mastermind group, I began to be challenged. Okay, what are you doing this week? Okay, well, what am I going to do next week in terms of envisioning the kind of contractor I wanted to become? And I can tell you, oh my gosh, over the years, in the beginning, I had this picture, because in the beginning of my career, coming into construction, I knew absolutely nothing. Now, this is imagination. Now I'm in this book. I knew absolutely nothing about construction. And I heard that a man was coming to town who at the time was the largest contractor in the United States. And this was as a result of the Miami riots. And he was coming to help contractors learn how to do construction by bidding on a major project, which is the largest project in the county's history, which was in Miami-Dade after the riots. Now, coming back to this principle of imagination, I began to imagine myself being a Black female doing what this Black male was doing at some time in the future. Imagination. With that thought in mind, going back to the design principle in the beginning of the book, I began to listen and do what I saw him do, using the imagination of how can I become that. Now, I didn't think about this actually until we started going back over this principle again. But now here I am today. He's gone. He passed away years ago. But here now I sit today with that imagination becoming a reality, not being a reality. Let's make sure we're clear on what Ann McNeil is saying. We're all becoming that which we imagine. We are in the becoming business. We are becoming, because once we say we are whatever that is, and we've become whatever that is, we're actually saying then, I'm done. I'm perfect. There's nothing else for me to do, to be, to learn, to have, because I'm done. No, not done, not done. And I want to go back to the idea that all of this, and if any of you love to read, please read Ms. Stovall's book, The Game of Life and How to Play It, because it is really all, Galen, Peter, and all of you that's listening, it is a game. but do you really know how to play the game when it comes to, do you understand how to use your imagination? Because in this other book, The Game of Life, the author shares that until we are knowledgeable, if you will, knowledgeable about spiritual laws, and that's really what this book is about, is teaching us how to connect spiritual laws to what we can imagine we want to do and be, and then using these affirmations, if you will, and all these other principles to bring that into reality, but over time. So those are just some thoughts from me, but I would tell you, the more I read this book and study, the more I know I do not know. Do not know. Just some thoughts.
Oh my gosh, so powerful. The thing that I continued to be focused on when I was listening to you, Anne, is in the book when it talks about the creative imagination works automatically in the manner described in the subsequent pages. This faculty only functions when the conscious mind is vibrating at an exceeding rapid rate. As an example, when the conscious mind is stimulated through the emotion of a strong desire. So you have to be willing to put yourself in situations when you're not the smartest person in the room. I'm going to tell you that I have become an incredibly better coach because I've been hanging out with Dr. Peter James. I've been hanging out with other coaches who are amazing. I've become an incredibly better speaker because I've been hanging out with Ann McNeil and Dr. Willie Jolly and just all of these coaches who are by far and away, they're about as close to being legendary as speakers as I will probably see. But because I am allowing myself to be in the room where all of this information is coming at a rapid pace, that's what's tapping into, that's what's inspiring my imagination. So my question to I guess each of you, but really to our listeners, do you allow yourself to be in situations when you're not the smartest person in the room? Do you allow, or do you allow your ego to protect you and limit your growth because you want to be the one standing on the stage? You want to be the one with all the answers. You want to be the one that knows all the answers. To Ann's point, once you say I know all the all the answers, you're done because you're not growing. Your heart isn't open to what else could be coming. Peter, what's your thoughts? What's your experience with this idea of allowing your mind to be at a high vibration rate so that you can receive more creative imagination?
Yeah, great question there, Galen. And you made me think about putting yourself in places that are often uncomfortable. It's easy for our minds to say, you don't need to go there. You don't need to go to that conference or to hear that talk. You have to travel 30 minutes. You have to fly, right, to get there, just to hear somebody talk, someone who's an expert. You don't have to go to that training. You don't need that. It's going to be money or it's going to be time, right? It's easy for us to not put ourselves in those spaces, and I wonder, if we did that a little bit more, as you even mentioned, surrounding yourself with others in a mastermind setting, even in just a listening setting where you're able to just soak it all in. But also, again, as Ann McNeil had mentioned, you abhor crime initially, but if you're around it long enough, it just becomes a part of you. You become comfortable with it. Here's a great example. If in your family there was all thieves around you, by default, you will migrate to that pattern in life. Too many stories that identify that. And so that's what we're doing, except I'm not trying to surround myself with a life of crime. I'm trying to surround myself with individuals who are doing something, going somewhere, speaking specifics about what they're doing, their future. How about not even just talking about it, doing it? And I'm learning from them. I'm listening to them. I'm applying what they're saying repetitively. For those of you who are watching, what does that look like for you? Kudos to you if you're listening to this today. But what else? Where else? It's a good question there, Galen. It's a very introspective for sure. What are you thinking, McNeil?
I'm just thinking about this whole idea going back to this subconscious mind, because again, what are we feeding? And that's, I think, was Galen's point. What are we feeding? What are we really feeding the subconscious mind? And when you think about imagination, I never really thought about how these two things, which are really three, are actually connected until I continued to read additional books like The Science of Mind, The Power of the Subconscious Mind, and it began to help me understand when I thought I had one mind, right? Talking about imagination, what does that have to do with my mind? But when you think about there's actually three: subconscious, Galen, you brought this up, the conscious, and then the superconscious. Conscious, subconscious, and superconscious. And what do they have to do with my imagination and how it works? Well, it is said that when we feel something deeply, right, that these impressions, if you will, that they're impressed upon what we now know is our subconscious mind. And these feelings, again, they're from my imagination. So if I'm imagining something negative and dark, that's why I cannot watch scary movies. I do not watch news, because the more I'm learning about the power of this, there's no way I can see bloody, gory, killing. Remember now, my subconscious mind does not know the difference between what's true and false. It does not separate, and that's news, that's somebody else, and that was something that was made up in a movie. No, my mind is saying to me, this is real. We know it's not real. I just need y'all to follow with me here for a minute, okay? Because sometimes these emotions that emote, if you will, from the feelings, they're so deep and they're impressed upon our subconscious mind, and we don't know it. We don't know it. And so this is why I believe that the advertisers, they're not paid millions. They're paid billions, trillions of dollars to impact how we think. And I keep repeating on this podcast, I love watching 60 Minutes. But I'm reminded that many years ago, 60 Minutes would have a 60-second commercial. That's a minute. I now can count 5, 6, 7 commercials in that 60 seconds. And it is impacting how I think, because now I'm being controlled, if you will, and the rest of us, by these advertisers to buy things I don't need, to go places I never thought about. The subconscious really is power without direction, if you can think about it like that. And it's like it is said, it's kind of like steam or electricity, but it's not directed anywhere. It has no power. But when you think about, and this is a part of our study as we get to the end of this book, toward the end of the year, but when you think about that conscious mind and the superconscious mind and begin to study that and how it impacts our imagination, and how our imagination, a vision board, simple vision board. We've watched The Secret. We've watched people talk from The Secret about, oh, I imagined that I was going to live in this beautiful house, lost the picture, and now I'm living in the house. How did that happen? So again, I want to challenge all of us as we begin to prepare to wrap up. What are you envisioning? And this is something Dr. James will talk about often. He says, you know, what are you envisioning? What are you imagining? Equally as important, what is it you desire? What is it that you desire? And are you willing to desire it long enough? That's why the author tells us about getting a picture, a vision board, or a picture of something that you want, not just in your mind, but a visual, actual picture you can see. Books, picture books, whatever, that will impact your imagination. So, I mean, we can go so many places in this principle. We have it the entire month. We want to thank those of you that are listening in with us in the Zoom. So thank you for participating, and those that are listening live on Facebook or YouTube. Remember, comment, like, and share this show, and think about how you use your superconscious mind, which is the God mind, if you will, which we all have access to. But how do we use our imagination to tap into that? Powerful, guys. Powerful, powerful. Back to you, Galen. Peter.
Yeah, we talked about the importance of surrounding yourself with people who are in alignment with where you're trying to go, and they may be farther down the path, and therefore someone that you might want to enroll as a mentor. They may be behind you, therefore someone that you can inspire, or they could be in the same place that you're at, struggling with the exact same questions, making the exact same mistakes, and therefore just great accountability partners. One of the things that the International Mastermind Association does every year is they hold an annual meeting so that you can be around other like-minded people who are on the same journey. Some are farther down the path, some are behind you, some are in the same place that you're in, but you can tell that everyone's heading in the same direction. And the value of this is to gain encouragement and clarity as to how do you navigate this path towards this thing that you say that you desire. So I'm going to challenge you to put this on your calendar today, to make plans, to make this investment in yourself and in your dreams today. There is a lot of work that you have to do before you can go to this annual meeting, because you can't just pay your fare and show up on the day and expect to be entertained. There's work. You have to put your life in writing. You have to document all the things that you've accomplished over the past year, as well as the things that you're desiring to achieve the upcoming year, and your plan and your strategies for making them a reality. Anne is famous for saying that this is not a conference. So if you're expecting a conference keynote speaker, if you're expecting a goodie bag, if you're expecting any of that stuff that we usually associate with conferences, you're going to be disappointed. But what you are going to walk away with is you're going to walk away with clarity around how do you make your dreams a reality, and possibly a group of 3 or 4 or 5 people who will help you along that journey as a mastermind group. So I challenge everyone to put this on your calendar today and plan on being in Orlando. Oh, sorry, Boca Raton.
Well, he said Orlando because the National Speakers Association is going to be in Orlando in July. So we want to make sure you do come to that too. So thank you so very much for that. Now, you see what Galen did subconsciously. His imagination was on Orlando and the National Speakers Association. So what came out of his mouth was what was imagined in his subconscious mind. Yes, Galen, thank you so much for teeing that up. But I want to go back to challenging all of us to think about who we must become in using our imagination to achieve our desire. So as we prepare to wrap up, keep in mind that first you must have a desire, and then you connect your imagination to the desire. Can I say that again? Because sometimes we have all these ideas all over the place. And one of the things I said as a part of our Black NSA Master, we talked about decision a week or so ago, right? Galen and Peter, and thank you guys also for participating in that. But the imagination and decision and all of these other principles are always directly or should be directly connected to your desire. Because if you have no desire, then that imagination does not have a magnet to pull from the infinite ideas to help you in the achievement of the desire. Does that make sense? I have to say that because I had a call this last week about participating, and I won't say too much about this until it becomes a reality, but I had on my vision board for over 25, 30 years, a business that I wanted to be in. And I tried for many years, many, and it just kept failing. I kept it on the board and I just forgot about it. I got a call 2 weeks ago about partnering with one of the largest firms in the world on that idea. I put it back in the storehouse. I forgot about it. I didn't call them. I didn't go seek them out. But it was in my plan so many years ago, and I just didn't have the heart to remove it. That is the imagination principle at work. I just went on working on me and becoming that which God would have me to be, to do, and to have, and to help serve. And then I got the call. That is how your imagination will work. So the question becomes for all of us as we wrap up, what do you want? So we're going to wrap up. Dr. Peter James, if you want to go ahead, and I'm not sure if any comments from the chat. We have just been so engulfed in talking with each other that it is past time that we wrap up. So if you want to give any aha moments from what you've discussed or shared, or any aha moments you've gotten, Galen, we're going to bring you back in, add you back to the podcast. So, Peter.
Yeah, I have to admit that when you said we're getting ready to get to a close, I had to look at the time, like, oh my goodness, we're that close to the end here. Wow. Yeah, so many gems, so many value bombs, as I like to call them, that really have allowed reinforcing to me what I need to continue to do. Stepping back into my vision board as an example, surrounding myself with the right voices, eliminating news, eliminating negative contents, which is sometimes so easy to pick up, right? But how do I stay on that right trajectory? How do I stay on that to ensure that I'm not surrounding myself with a life of crime, right? I want to be on that level. I want to be on that trajectory. I want to be able to reaffirm to myself what I desire to accomplish. And imagination, after I'm doing that surrounding and that inundating and the educating and listening, imagination will manifest.
Can I
That's
ask,
what go ahead.
Something? Oh gosh.
No, you're good.
Oh, listen, you may want to reframe that.
Okay, tell me your reframe it.
You're not going to, you are currently
Right,
speaking,
right.
You want to speak in the present.
Yes,
because
yes.
Right. I don't know who you
am.
think Galen and I are in your mastermind group. So we all are becoming, and we're not the same people we were when we first started this years ago.
Sure.
And I want to commend Galen. I was naturally, everybody see that? Wait, how do I? Yes, can you see
Whiskey,
that?
Jazz, and Leadership.
Yes,
podcast.
this is Galen's podcast. Now we're going to go back and show you the one he did in the very beginning. No, we're not going to do that because your imagination will work on that old one. That was the old Galen. We just started the podcast. For those of you that have to go, we'll see you later, but we're going to continue this conversation until we get it. Yeah. Because we are in the process also.
It's an evolution.
Yes, it's an evolution, but it's a journey and it's no destination, you see. So you want to tell people how to reach you?
Dr. Peter A. James. You can find me at shiftyourmindset.com or any social media platform at Dr. Peter A. James. That's at DrPeterAJames. Galen.
Oh my gosh, what an incredible conversation, and then Miss Ann, you started me to thinking about the power of your vision board. And I was reflecting earlier on my vision board, and the text talks about the limitations that we put on ourselves. I'm curious as to how many times we put limitations on what we believe we should even desire. And when we did the vision board as part of the annual meeting 3 years ago, I just went crazy. I just started. I didn't think about how I was going to accomplish it. I just said, you know what? I would love to have this high level of certification within the International Coach Federation. I'd love to have that certification. I was just beginning my coaching career, so that seemed pretty lofty. And I said, you know, hey, I would love to be on the stage with some of my speaking mentors like Les Brown. I'd love to be on the same stage as Les Brown. That would just be amazing. And you know what? I've always wanted to have a Porsche. So I want to have a charcoal gray Porsche with red interior. Just, I would love to have that someday. And I put that on my vision board and I forgot about it until earlier in the year. I get a call from Ann saying, Galen, would you mind hosting this particular Thinking of Rich show? Because we've got a very special guest. Les Brown is going to be our guest. And I'd like for you to be the navigating host. And then I continue to work on my craft, and I look up and I've got enough hours, I've got enough experience, I've got enough of training to sit for that certification in the International Coach Federation that I, a few years back just seemed so far out. And so now I have that certification. And 2 weeks ago, my car that I've had for 10 years, actually 11 years, it served me well, but it just, Galen, I can't go any further. And so I said, okay, well, let's go look at some cars. And of course, I test drove the Porsche, but the Porsche didn't feel as luxurious as I thought it would. So we went and looked at this other car and just happened to pull into this lot. And the car that we pulled right next to that was for sale happened to be charcoal gray with red interior. And it was on the same level as the Porsche. So again, I didn't necessarily actively pursue these things, but because I worked on myself, these things that were on my vision board from 4 years ago, they are now part of my reality. So back to what Peter was saying, back to what Ann was saying, what things, big or small, are we putting on our vision board? What things are we surrounding ourselves with? Because we are always in the process of becoming that thing that we surround ourselves with. My name is Galen Bingham, the leadership strategist. So many different ways to get a hold of me, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. But the most fun way is to follow me on my podcast, Whiskey, Jazz, and Leadership. We talk to leaders from all over the world, from every walk of life. We talk about the whiskeys they drink, the music they listen to, and what they believe it really takes to be an effective leader. Right now, in the middle of a conversation with Pegeen Escavera. She's the speaker who only requires one name, and she's just dropping so much inspiration. She was one of our co-hosts for years and years. I double dog dare you to try us just once. I guarantee you'll pick up something that will help you achieve your goals.
All right. Well, you heard it here, everybody. I do want to let all of you know that we do have a new way we're going to start and end, and it's just like this. But just in case you're paying attention, we're going to start like this. We're going to end like this, just so you know they're all connected. And it's our creative imagination at work. It's working because we're working it, right? Well, again, my name is Ann McNeil. I am so excited, but then I'm always excited and inspired. And my desire is to continue to encourage you to really be, do, and have whatever your inspiration is encouraging you and pulling you to. You can connect with me by going to annmcneil.com/coaching. If you have a desire to connect with that creativity as a part of our Clarity Mastermind, annmcneil.com/coaching. But if you have a desire to really want to understand that principal desire and how you connect with that, you can text the word "and," that's ANN, at 55678. That number again is 55678. And just text the word "and" in the chat, and I'll send that information back to you quickly. We are the International Mastermind Association Think and Grow Rich Mastermind group. Our desire and goal is to encourage all of you to consider creating a mastermind group of accountability and have that group to serve as an accountability on your dreams, your goals, and your desires as you walk through these principles with us every single month. And until next week, we do have a special guest, but you have got to come to find out who that guest is. I'm not going to tell you, but we will see all of you next week. And remember to comment, like, and share the show, but also subscribe to our YouTube channel. Until then, remember to think and grow rich.